He sat in the defendant's chair like a man carved from stone, cold, still, and unreadable. Dressed in a neatly pressed suit, his hands folded gently on the table, eyes downcast, he seemed more like a man burdened by injustice than someone accused of a violent crime. His name was Darren Cole, 33 years old, former youth counselor, accused of kidnapping and aggravated assault. He had proclaimed his innocence from the very beginning, never faltering in his stance. His attorney painted a picture of a misunderstood man, a scapegoat caught in a whirlwind of mistaken identity and overzealous law enforcement. And for a while, people began to believe it. Even the prosecution, despite their initial confidence, started considering a plea deal just to ensure some form of conviction stuck. After all, the evidence wasn't airtight. Some of it was circumstantial, some muddled by procedural errors. But the case took a sharp, irreversible turn the moment the guards from Fulton County Jail were called to testify. Judge West had a reputation that echoed through the legal halls like thunder. Fair but firm, deeply intuitive, and completely unshaken by theatrics. He'd overseen hundreds of criminal cases, many worse than Darren's, but something about this one gnawed at him. Maybe it was Darren's calm demeanor, the robotic politeness, or maybe it was the letters, the handwritten pleas from families of the victims, the staff who had once worked with him, all of them whispering the same thing between the lines. There's more to him than you think. The courtroom had been packed that day, journalists lining the rear, victims' advocates in the pews, and an eerie hush as the first jail guard approached the witness stand. Sergeant Maria Ellis had been working the correctional unit for 15 years. She was tough, respected, and not one to exaggerate. When asked about Darren's behavior while in custody, her jaw clenched slightly, and she adjusted the microphone. On the surface, he was polite. Never caused trouble during the day. Didn't raise his voice. Didn't argue. But there was something off, she said slowly. He had this way of watching people, measuring them, as if he was trying to figure out what they feared. The defense scoffed, trying to downplay it as paranoia, but Judge West leaned forward, curious. Sergeant, did anything unusual ever happen around Mr. Cole? Sergeant Ellis hesitated, then nodded. Inmates who bunked near him began to request transfers. One by one, even the toughest ones. Said they'd rather spend time in solitary than in that block. Said he talked in his sleep. Said they'd wake up and he'd be sitting on the edge of their beds, just staring. The courtroom stirred. Darren didn't move. No visible reaction. Just blinked slowly and kept his hands folded. Then came Officer Kemp. Young, newer to the force, and visibly uncomfortable on the stand. He tried to charm everyone. He said, voice shaking slightly. Said all the right things. But when you walked away, you felt like you'd been read, like he knew something you didn't want him to know. Then came the notes. That got everyone's attention. What notes? The prosecutor asked. Kemp looked at the judge, as if asking permission to speak honestly. We started finding little slips of paper, folded perfectly, in other inmates' cells. Notes detailing their crimes, their weaknesses, even things they'd never told anyone in the facility. Stuff only they knew. Somehow, Darren knew it all. Gasps rippled through the room. Darren turned his head slightly, just slightly, toward Officer Kemp. The officer visibly recoiled. One day, he continued, an inmate named Rigo, tough guy, 3-time felon, came out screaming. Said Darren whispered something to him about his sister. Said he told him what she looked like, where she lived, what school her daughter went to. Rigo went ballistic. We had to sedate him. When we searched Darren's cell, we found no contraband. But we did find something else. That's when they submitted the surveillance footage into evidence. Judge West ordered the courtroom to be silent. What played next was just a few minutes of grainy, night vision jail camera footage, but it changed everything. The video showed Darren sitting in his cell at 2:47 a.m. The lights were dimmed for lights out. Most inmates were asleep. But Darren? He wasn't asleep. He sat on the edge of his bed, perfectly still, for hours. Then, without a word, he stood and approached the bars. He stood there, looking straight ahead for 12 minutes. Then, as if in some silent trance, he turned to the camera and stared directly into it. His eyes locked, unblinking, like he knew it was there. No reaction, no movement, just staring. The silence in the room was suffocating. Even Judge West looked rattled. But it wasn't just that moment. The footage kept playing. And then something truly disturbing happened. Darren began whispering. No one else was around. He was alone. Yet he spoke in a soft, eerie tone, eyes still locked on the lens. The audio quality was poor, but the tech team cleaned it enough to catch a few phrases. "You know what they did?" he said. "They think they're safe now, but no one's safe. Then, I can smell your guilt." People in the courtroom visibly recoiled. One woman began to cry. The prosecutor asked to pause the video. Judge West didn't speak for nearly 30 seconds. Then he asked the tech to rewind the footage and play the whispered audio again. This time, they boosted the volume. And what they heard chilled everyone to the bone. Darren, still staring at the camera, slowly said, "He will beg for mercy, and I will make him believe I forgave him." Before I finish what I started, the defense attorney stood up, objecting. "Your Honor, we don't know what he meant. These are just ramblings. He could have been sleep-talking." But then the next guard testified. Warden Hargrave had managed the jail for over a decade. Known for his professionalism and restraint, he was the last person to get emotional. But on the stand, he looked shaken. He held a small, sealed envelope in his hands. "We confiscated this 2 days ago," he said. "One of our officers caught Darren trying to pass it to another inmate. He handed it to the judge. We've authenticated the handwriting and tested the ink. It's real." Judge West opened the envelope and read the note aloud. "Tell your son I haven't forgotten what he did in 2006. The basement, the attic. She cried for hours. You raised a monster, and now you'll bury one." Gasps again. A reporter dropped her pen. Darren's face was still unreadable, but his fingers twitched for the first time. The courtroom dissolved into chaos. The judge called for order. Victims' families were now crying. The defense asked for an immediate recess. But Judge West had seen enough. He turned to the prosecution. "Is this the man you want walking free on a plea deal?" he said, voice calm but thunderous. "Is this the man you think deserves leniency?" No one spoke. "I reject the plea," Judge West said. "Full trial. Maximum transparency. No deals. Let the jury see the man they're dealing with." His gavel hit the bench like a gunshot. The trial proceeded in full, and more evidence came out. Unsent letters, eerie journal entries, even testimony from a nurse who overheard Darren whispering the names of people who hadn't been publicly identified yet. The jury took only 4 hours to convict him. Life without parole. But even after sentencing, strange reports continued from the prison where he was transferred. Lights flickering at odd times. Inmates claiming he watched them in their sleep. Guards quitting after brief stints in his block. And somewhere deep in the correctional facility's surveillance room, a guard swore that Darren still looked straight at the camera every night, without blinking. The story of Darren Cole was no longer just another courtroom drama. It became a legend, a tale whispered among inmates and officers alike. About a man who wore innocence like a mask, who knew too much, and whose quiet presence unnerved even the most hardened criminals. And Judge West? He never doubted his decision. Sometimes justice isn't just about what's done in the light. It's about recognizing the darkness that hides behind polite smiles and empty eyes. And as long as he sat on that bench, he vowed never to be fooled again.